Today we're going to go over hip hinge movement. This movement a lot of people struggle with because it is not something that we do in our everyday lives. It is a very different type of movement than what we're used to, but it's very important for strengthening the hamstrings and the glute muscles and even some of the lower back muscles. We want to make sure that we do it properly so we don't injure our backs. So I'm going to go over that today. So the way you want to start learning this movement is by what's called a good morning. So for a good morning, you just want to take your hands and place them on the back of your neck. This helps with keeping our chest out, shoulders back, and allowing us to hinge at the hip. So hinging at the hip means that we want to keep our legs still, our knees still. So a lot of people, when they're trying to do good mornings, deadlift type of positions, they want to bend their knees. And yes, some of our deadlift movements do require a knee bend, but for a lot of deadlift positions, good mornings, we're not squatting with the knees. The knees are staying still. So you can place the hands on the back of the neck. Do not pull on your neck, just place them there. You can place them out to the side if you have a tendency to want to grab and pull. If that is not comfortable for you, if you're really tight in the shoulders, then just place your hands right here on the front of your legs, just right here. And you're just going to glide down your legs. Okay, so our hips are right here. So we want to hinge at the hips. Now this is going to feel funny and awkward at first, but once you do it and get used to it, you will feel your hamstrings and glutes engage, and then it'll feel right because you're working those muscles. Okay, so a few key things. We want to make sure that we're keeping our chest out. If we don't keep our chest out, then as we start to do this with weights, then we're going to start to round over with our shoulders at the top. So if you keep that chest out, keep it pushed out, that will keep you from rounding over at the shoulders. Again, it's going to feel funny. You're going to feel like you're sticking your butt out, your chest is out, you're going to feel like you're kind of doing a chicken walk or a chicken stance. But that is how we activate those muscles. So be sure to push that chest out. All right, so good mornings. So we want to hinge at the hips. Now, some people that have really tight hamstrings need a little bit of bend in the knee. So if you need a little bend in the knee, that is fine. Just bend the knee slightly, but we're hinging from the hip. We're not bending further into those knees. So kick the knees in slightly and then sit the hips back. Pretend like there's a chair behind you or something that you're trying to like hit with your butt. All right, so slight bend in the knees, hips back, chest out. Again, it's gonna feel super awkward. It should feel awkward. Okay, so slight bend in the knees, hips back, chest out. Then, if your hands are on your legs, you're just going to keep them there and you're just going to glide down, only going down as far as you can keep your back flat. Again, we don't want to round. We don't want to round the lower back or the upper back. We want to keep it as flat as possible. So only go down as far as you can keep the back flat and then rise back up. Now, when you come back up, we want to make sure we don't arch backwards. We want to stop right here. Squeezing those glutes will help with that. So again, chest out, slight bend in the knees, bending from that hip, going down as far as we can keep the back flat, and then squeeze the glutes to come back up, and then they will lock into place, which will prevent us from arching backwards. Okay. So we're putting our hands up on our neck, then we are hinging again from the hip. Be sure to keep that chest out. You'll feel this in the low back, glutes, and hamstrings. So bending from that hip, coming back up. So we do not want to bend our knees further down. We are hinging at the hips, but we want to keep those knees still and have the bend come from here. If it helps, you can stand against a wall and go forward from the wall to kind of get that feeling. So imagine that your legs are up against a wall and just go a little ways and you'll feel that hip bending from that hip position. This is really useful if you need to pick something up from the floor that's not heavy, because we want to lift heavy with our legs, but if you just drop something like a piece of paper, you can bend down like this, come back up. Now, if we have something heavy, like suitcases at an airport, say we're traveling, we have 2 suitcases with us, we're going on a long trip, 1 on each side, then we want to go down, and we are going to bend the knees on this. This is a type of hip hinge, which it does bend the knees. So you're going to grab your suitcases and come back up. I'm going to do that from the side so you can see the hip hinge. So we lower ourselves with our knees, but see how I'm hinging at the hips at the same time. Hinging there at the hips to grab those suitcases and then coming back up. Are you seeing that hip hinge there? So this is called a suitcase deadlift. So yes, there is some knee movement to grab the object, but the main movement is coming from hinging at that hip. Hinges are like this. Doors, our knee joints hinge. That's just a movement that allows it to go back and forth. That's what we want from our hips, that back and forth movement. Okay, so then once you've done that, mastered that, got a little bit of strength in the glutes and hamstrings, then you can start adding some weights. Now this doesn't change the movement. We're still keeping that same movement. So slight bend in the knees if you need it for flexibility. If you have the hamstring flexibility to keep them straight, that is fine. I do recommend just a slight bend. You want to make sure that your knees are not going backwards. You don't want to strain your knees. So you want to make sure that when you go down, your knees are not going backwards. Everybody has different hamstring flexibility, but as you go down, even if you're keeping your knees straight for the most part, you might want to just bring them in just a tad so that they're not going backwards, because you do not want to strain the knee. So grab some dumbbells. You can even do this with a bar as well. Just going to hold it right here in front of the legs. You want to keep the weight nice and close to those legs. That'll help you keep your form on this. Again, only going down as far as you can keep your back flat, keeping that chest puffed out, because again, we have these weights in our hands. We do not want to round over. We don't want to let the weights pull us. Our muscles are controlling the weights are not controlling us. So, gliding down and coming back up. So that is deadlifts with weights, dumbbells, and a bar. Bar would be the same thing. You just have that one piece instead of the 2. And then from there, you can move into kettlebells. Again, you can do that suitcase deadlift if you have 2 kettlebells. You have 1 on each side, and we're doing this movement here, just like this. It is a suitcase deadlift. Now if you just have 1 kettlebell, same thing. Keeping it nice and close, coming up. Feet placement for this. You want to make sure your feet are under your hips. We don't want them wide. That changes the movement. Want to make sure Feet are nice and tight under the hips. Keeping that weight nice and close, back flat, chest out, and hinging at that hip. Then from there, you can move into swings. You can do kettlebell swings, you can do dumbbell swings, which are called skiers. So with that, we're still hinging from that hip. You're gonna hold your kettlebell. I'm gonna show the kettlebell first. You're gonna hold your kettlebell here. Your feet may need to be a little bit wider for this, just so you have room to swing your kettlebell between your legs. But again, we don't want to be way out here. We want to keep them pretty tight, just maybe slightly wider than your hips, just so you have enough room for that kettlebell to swing through. So I'm going to show it from the side first. So, slight bend in the knees, sit the hips back to start the movement, bringing the kettlebell down and swinging it up. We do not want to arch the back as we come up. And you want to keep the kettlebell pretty much in line with the shoulders at the top. We don't want to go way up here. That puts a lot of work into those shoulders. So we're driving that kettlebell up with our hamstrings and glutes. It's one fluid movement. We do not want to come up and then raise it and then go down. We do not want to do this. That is making it a shoulder lift. When you do this, that weight is affecting the hamstrings and glutes. If you turn it into a shoulder lift, they're not getting that benefit, your shoulders are. Okay, so that's a kettlebell swing. If you want to do it with dumbbells, it's called skiers. So you're just going to hold a dumbbell in each hand. Again, your feet can be closer under your hips because you don't have to do it. Your dumbbells are not having to go in between your legs. You're going to hold them on each side. Again, start at that position. Slight bend in the knees, sit those hips back, chest out. Bring those dumbbells back and drive them forward. Again, we do not want to let our backs arch. We do not want to overswing here. We want to stop the movement here. Come back, stop that movement. So squeezing those glutes is really important with this. I'll show you what it looks like from the front. So here and coming up. Again, we do not want to, what's one fluid movement? We do not want to stop in the middle. We don't want to come here and then up. This is not what we want to do. We want to drive those weights from our hamstrings and glutes. Okay, then there's an option for a windmill if you want to make it a little interesting. So feet are going to be wide on this one. One hand goes up with a weight. You can do it without a weight too until you hit a hang of it, because this is challenging. Then, again, we bend from the hips. And you're going to reach down at an angle to the ground and come back up. Reach down, come back up. Again, keeping that back nice and flat. I'll show you from the side. So I'm bending from the hips, come back up. Bend, come back up. That is called a windmill. You would do that on each side. And that is a hip hinge movement that changes it up from that deadlift and kettlebell swing position. So, thanks for joining me today. Like and subscribe to this video so you can see my next one. My next one, I'm going to go over bridges, which is also a hip hinge type of movement. It is on the floor, also engages those hamstrings and glutes, and we'll go over all sorts of bridge variations. So, again, like and subscribe to this so you can catch my next video, and thanks for joining me.